On June 27, 1954, democratically elected President Jacobo Árbenz resigns after a week of civil unrest. He flees to Mexico amid reports that his life is in danger. Hours later, the leader of the military junta, Carlos Castillo Armas, announces the creation of a new government. The United States applauds the change in leadership and continues to support the new regime until 1957. So what exactly happened in Guatemala? Why did the U.S. support this coup? And why does this event matter today? In 1951, Jacobo Árbenz became president of Guatemala following a decade of relative peace and quiet. Under his predecessor, Juan, Guatemala had enjoyed a period of stability and come known as the 10 Years of Spring. But with the end of the Second World War, the United States grew increasingly concerned about the spread of communism. This fear led to a foreign policy known as the Good Neighbor Policy, which aimed to improve relations between the U.S. and Latin America by promoting democracy and economic development. However, this policy soon gave way to a more confrontational approach rooted in Cold War paranoia. Washington began viewing any leftist government in the region as a potential communist threat and sought to prevent the rise of left-leaning leaders across Latin America. Arbenz's reform program was genuinely progressive. His government modernized the country's economy, built new schools and hospitals, and implemented policies to protect labor rights. However, his most significant policy, Decreto 900, threatened the interests of some very powerful people. This law reformed the agrarian system by redistributing unused lands from large estates to landless peasants. Most of these lands were owned by the United Fruit Company, an American corporation with extensive holdings in Guatemala. The company claimed that the lands were being used for their stated value. But critics argued that the company was exploiting the workers and keeping wages low by controlling land prices. Regardless, the government's decision to redistribute the land without compensating the company would have severe consequences. The United Fruit Company had extensive connections in Washington, D.C., and lobbied the U.S. government to intervene. As pressure mounted on Arbenz, the CIA began a covert operation to remove him from office. Covert operations were nothing new for the agency since its creation in 1947. The CIA had been involved in numerous plots to overthrow foreign governments that were deemed unfriendly to the U.S. The agency had successfully removed democratically elected prime minister in Iran in 1953 and had attempted, albeit unsuccessfully, to assassinate the Cuban dictator Batista in 1959. So when the opportunity arose to remove another leftist leader in Guatemala, the agency jumped at the chance. The CIA launched Operation PBSUCCESS. In March 1954, the operation involved training and arming Guatemalan exiles, funding psychological warfare campaigns, and orchestrating propaganda to destabilize the government. By May, the situation in Guatemala was tense. Riots broke out in the capital city, and there were rumors of an imminent military coup. On June, a rebel force backed by the CIA and led by Carlos Castillo Armas invaded from neighboring Honduras. Their goal was simple: march on the capital and overthrow the government. Despite being outnumbered 10-1, the rebel force made significant progress. Within 2 days, they had advanced 120 kilometers towards the capital. Faced with the prospect of further bloodshed, Arbenz resigned on June 27, 1954, in the aftermath. Castillo Armas returned to Guatemala and established a new government. He reversed many of Arbenz's reforms and restored lands to United Fruit and other elites. Over the next few years, the U.S. provided over $1 million to support the new regime. But by 1957, Castillo Armas grew increasingly autocratic, and the U.S. withdrew its support. In 1997, the CIA released documents confirming its role in the coup. This revelation renewed debate about U.S. foreign policy and its impact on Latin America. Historians continue to debate the legacy of the coup today. Some argue that the CIA saved Guatemala from a communist takeover, while others contend that it was a blatant example of corporate greed and Cold War paranoia undermining democracy. The 1954coup in Guatemala was a pivotal moment in the country's history. It marked the end of the era of democratic reforms and the beginning of decades of political repression, civil conflict, and social upheaval. Today, the events of June 1954 serve as a reminder of the fragility of democracy and the dangers of foreign intervention. This video was made possible by a center that explores the intersection of history and politics through educational videos. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe.